Get your hands off me. I said get your hands off me. That was the first thing Celeste Boateng heard when she walked through the revolving doors on a Tuesday morning in March. Not a greeting. Not the soft piano music the lobby was famous for. Just her husband's voice, low, controlled, the way it got when he was trying very hard not to become something he wasn't raised to be. If you've ever watched someone you love be humiliated in a room full of people who pretend not to notice, you know exactly what happened next inside Celeste's chest. Something cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like a fault line shifting underground. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end the way you might expect. And if you're new here, welcome to Lineage Tales. Hit that subscribe button and make sure your notifications are on, because every week we bring you stories that remind you who you are and where you come from. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Because the beginning matters. Nathaniel Boateng was 53 years old and had not owned a suit in 11 years. Not because he couldn't afford one. He could afford the entire floor of the department store where suits were sold. He just didn't see the point. He wore what he wore. Clean, dark jeans. A gray Henley. A weathered canvas jacket, the color of military olive. He had the hands of someone who had built things. Wide-knuckled, calloused at the base of the thumb. He kept his hair short and his beard trimmed neat. He was not a man who announced himself. That was, in many ways, the whole problem. The Aldridge Grand was not the kind of place that forgave ambiguity. It sat on the corner of Peachtree and 5th, in Midtown, Atlanta. 42 floors of glass and limestone that had been restored to its 1920s grandeur by an investment group that had purchased it out of bankruptcy in 2019. The lobby smelled like gardenias and cedar. The bellhops wore white gloves. The concierge desk was staffed by a man named Jeffrey Lassiter. Wait, not that name. That name is taken. Let's keep moving. The concierge desk was staffed around the clock, and on the morning in question, the Tuesday morning in March, a man named Dale Pruitt was working the early shift. Dale was 31. He had been at the Aldridge Grand for 2 years. He had a way of looking at people that told you exactly what he thought of them before he'd heard a word they said. Nathaniel Boateng had walked in through those revolving doors at 8:47 in the morning. He was alone. Celeste had dropped him off and gone to find parking because the valet line was 6 cars deep, and she knew her husband well enough to know he would not wait in lines. He had very little patience for lines. He had even less patience for being made to feel like a visitor in a place he had every right to occupy. Dale Pruitt watched Nathaniel cross the lobby from behind the concierge desk. He watched the canvas jacket. He watched the jeans. He watched the way Nathaniel paused near the center of the lobby and looked up at the restored ceiling. The original 1924 plasterwork, painted cream and gold, with the quiet, proprietary attention of a man counting what he owned. Dale did not see a man counting what he owned. Dale saw something else entirely. He picked up the phone and called security. The security officer who responded was a man named Carl Ewing. Carl was 28, ex-military, had been at the hotel for 8 months. He was not a bad man. He was, in the way that many people are, simply a person who had learned to follow the path of least resistance. When Dale Pruitt called and said there was a man in the lobby who didn't look like a guest, Carl put down his coffee and went to find out. He found Nathaniel standing near the elevator bank, looking at his phone. "Excuse me, sir." Nathaniel looked up. He had a very particular way of looking at people who said sir in that particular tone, like the word was being used as a kind of cage. "Yeah. Can I ask what brings you to the Aldridge this morning?" Nathaniel looked at him for a moment. "I have a meeting. With a guest? With the property." Carl tilted his head. "I'm sorry. I have a meeting," Nathaniel said again very slowly. "With the property. Is that a problem?" Carl was already uncertain. He had not been given clear instructions. He had been told there was a man who didn't look like a guest, which was not, he was beginning to realize, an actual reason to do anything. But Dale Pruitt had appeared from behind the concierge desk and was now standing 12 feet away with his arms crossed, and Carl had the uncomfortable feeling of being watched by someone who expected him to perform. "Sir, I'm going to need to ask you to step outside while we verify." "You're going to need to ask me to do what?" There it was, that voice, low, controlled. The way it got. Sir, it's just protocol. Protocol. Nathaniel said the word like he was examining it for defects. Whose protocol? The hotel's? Sir, I'm not stepping outside. Nathaniel put his phone in his pocket. I'm not stepping anywhere, and I'd suggest you think very carefully about what you do next. That was when Dale Pruitt made his mistake. He stepped forward. He put his hand on Nathaniel's arm. And that was when Celeste Boateng walked through the revolving doors. She heard it before she saw it. Her husband's voice. Get your hands off me. I said, get your hands off me. She had been married to Nathaniel Boateng for 26 years. She had watched him build 4 companies from the ground up, bury his mother, coach their son's little league team every Saturday morning for 6 years regardless of weather, and cry exactly twice. Once at their daughter's wedding, and once at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial. On a trip they took for their 20th anniversary. She knew every register of his voice, and the register she was hearing right now, the low, careful, dangerous register, was one she had only heard a handful of times in their marriage. She crossed the lobby in 12 steps. What is happening here? Her voice was different from her husband's, where his went quiet when he was angry. Hers went precise, surgical. She was wearing a camel-colored blazer over a black turtleneck, and she had the kind of bearing that made people stand up straighter without knowing why. She was 50 years old, and she was not interested in being patient. Dale Pruitt looked at her. He made an assessment. The assessment was wrong. Ma'am, he seemed to be searching for the word. Companion was asked to step outside. My husband, she said. Ma'am? My husband. Say it correctly. A silence settled over the lobby. The 2 guests at the check-in desk had both stopped what they were doing. The woman polishing the brass fixtures near the elevator had gone very still. Your husband was exhibiting suspicious behavior. What behavior? Celeste said. Tell me exactly, what did he do? Dale opened his mouth, she said. He was standing in a lobby, she said, looking at his phone. That's what he did. Now. She reached into her blazer pocket and produced a business card. She held it out to Dale without moving toward him, so that he had to take the 3 steps to reach for it. Call that number. Tell whoever answers that Nathaniel and Celeste Boateng are in the lobby, and they'd like to proceed with their 9 o'clock. Dale took the card. He looked at it. Something shifted in his face. Not guilt, not yet, but a preliminary version of the thing that would eventually become guilt once the full picture assembled itself. The 9 o'clock, he said. The 9 o'clock meeting, Celeste said. With your general manager, regarding the acquisition. The word hung in the air of the lobby like smoke. Acquisition. Carl Ewing had already taken 2 very deliberate steps backward. He understood now, with the specific clarity of a man who has made an irreversible mistake, that whatever was happening here was well above his pay grade, and had been well above his pay grade from the moment Dale Pruitt picked up that phone. Now, let me tell you about Nathaniel Boateng, because he deserves to be known properly. And this is the part where we slow down. He had grown up in Decatur, Georgia, the second of 4 children. His father worked for the post office for 31 years. His mother cleaned houses and kept a garden in the backyard that produced more tomatoes than one family could ever eat. So, she gave most of them away to the neighbors. They were not wealthy people. They were, in the fullest sense of the word, solid. The kind of people who showed up when you needed them and never once asked what they'd get in return. Nathaniel had put himself through Georgia State on a combination of loans, a partial scholarship, and a job he worked 5 nights a week at a FedEx sorting facility. He graduated with a degree in civil engineering and went to work for a firm that built commercial real estate. He was good at the work. He was very good at it. He had a mind that could hold 3 problems at once and find the load-bearing point where they all connected. After 12 years, he left the firm and started his own company. After another 8 years, he sold it. Then he started another one. Then he sold that. By the time he was 45, Nathaniel Boateng was the kind of wealthy that people in his tax bracket called comfortable, which is a word that means something else entirely depending on what side of it you're standing on. He had never lost the canvas jacket. He had never lost the calloused hands. His mother always said the day a man stopped looking like the work that made him was the day he started forgetting who he was. He believed her. He did not own the Aldridge Grand Hotel. Not yet. His firm Boateng Capital Group, incorporated in Delaware, headquartered in a building on Peachtree that he also owned, had been in negotiations to acquire the Aldridge Grand for 7 months. The hotel's parent company was over-leveraged and looking for an exit. The property itself was extraordinary. 42 floors, 218 rooms, 3 restaurant spaces, a rooftop event venue with a view that made people spend money they hadn't planned to spend. The location was irreplaceable. The 9 o'clock meeting with the general manager, a man named Frank O'Sullivan, who had been running the hotel for 9 years and was a very good general manager and was at that moment upstairs in his office completely unaware that the man he was about to converse with had just been grabbed by the arm in his own lobby. That meeting was the final step before closing. Final step. And here they were. Dale Pruitt called the number on the business card. He called it with the slow, doomed movements of a man who already knew how this ended, but had no alternative but to watch it unfold. Frank O'Sullivan answered on the second ring. What Frank said to Dale on that phone call, no one in the lobby could hear, but they could watch Dale's face. And his face moved through a series of expressions. Confusion, then clarification, then a specific particular shade of white that had nothing to do with his complexion and everything to do with comprehension, that told the story without words. He hung up. He looked at Nathaniel. He looked at Celeste. Mr. Boateng, he said. Mrs. Boateng, Don't, Nathaniel said. Not angry. Not loud. Just a single word placed very carefully, like a period at the end of a sentence. Dale stopped. Where's the elevator? Dale pointed. Nathaniel and Celeste walked across the lobby together toward the elevator bank. Nathaniel did not hurry. He had a slow, deliberate walk, the walk of a man who understood that spaces moved to accommodate him, not the other way around. Celeste kept pace beside him, her blazer sharp, her head level. The woman who had been polishing the brass fixtures near the elevator. Her name was Alma. She had worked at the hotel for 11 years, held the elevator door open as they approached. She didn't say anything. But when Nathaniel met her eyes, she gave him a small, precise nod. The kind of nod that means I saw it. All of it. He nodded back. The elevator doors closed. Frank O'Sullivan was a practical man. And practical men, when faced with a situation they cannot undo, focus on what they can still influence. He met the Boatengs at the elevator on the 38th floor, and shook both their hands and did not offer an apology in the elevator lobby because he understood that was not the place. He led them to the conference room, where the papers were already laid out and the coffee was already poured, and said, very directly, without preamble, what happened downstairs is not acceptable. It is not representative of this property's values or mine. I am sorry it happened, and I am going to handle it personally. Nathaniel sat down. He wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. He looked at Frank O'Sullivan across the conference table for a long moment, the way he looked at buildings before. He decided whether to buy them, with patience, with attention, with the particular interest of a man trying to find the load-bearing point. I appreciate that, he said. Now let's talk about the roof. They talked about the roof. They talked about the restaurant leases and the structural assessment that had flagged a concern on the 14th floor, and then the revenue per available room for the previous 3 fiscal years. They talked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Celeste took notes in a notebook she kept in her blazer pocket, the same notebook she had carried since they was black, the company. A simple black moleskine that she went through at a rate of about 3 per year. The papers were signed at 11:52 in the morning. When they came back down in the elevator, the lobby was its usual Tuesday self. Guests checking in. Someone arguing quietly on a cell phone near the newspaper rack. Ugh. Nathaniel walked through it with the same unhurried step he'd arrived with. Ugh. Nobody stopped him. Nobody asked him anything. Dale Pruitt was not at the concierge desk. He would not be at the concierge desk the following morning either, or any morning after that. Frank O'Sullivan had made a phone call during the brief break in the meeting, and that call had set things in motion that were, by noon, already in motion. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the hotel's parent company had been notified. By 5 o'clock, There was a conversation happening between lawyers that Dale Pruitt did not yet know was happening. He would know within 48 hours. Carl Ewing was a different matter. Carl had not initiated the encounter. Carl had followed bad instructions badly, and Frank O'Sullivan, who was fair-minded when the situation allowed for it, believed there was a distinction worth making. Carl was written up. Carl attended mandatory training. Carl had the kind of week that people have when they understand, in a newly embodied way, why the things they were told in orientation actually matter. Now, before we get to the last part of this story, I want you to do something for me. If this story is hitting somewhere real, if you've ever been in a room where someone looked through you, or past you, or decided before you opened your mouth what you were worth, drop something in the comments. Doesn't have to be long. Doesn't have to be a story. Just let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment. We do this every week. Every single week. Stories like this one. Okay, let's finish. 3 months after the closing, Nathaniel and Celeste stood in the lobby of the Aldridge Grand at 7 in the morning for what would become a ritual. They arrived once a month, before the morning rush, and walked the property the way his mother used to walk her garden. Slowly, attentively, knowing what you were looking for because you knew the place in your hands. The plasterwork ceiling was still cream and gold. The gardenias were still there. The bellhop still wore white gloves. Alma was still there, too. She had been promoted to head of housekeeping services 6 weeks after the acquisition closed, a move that Frank O'Sullivan had recommended and that Celeste had approved in about 11 seconds. Alma, it turned out, had been running the practical operations of the floor teams for years, without the title or the pay that matched what she was already doing. Celeste had a very specific intolerance for that particular kind of institutional dishonesty. On this morning, in July, Alma was standing near the front desk when the Boatengs came through the revolving doors. She saw them and did what she always did. That small, precise nod, the one that meant, I see you. Nathaniel Boateng, owner of the Aldridge Grand Hotel, 42 floors of glass and limestone and 1924 plasterwork, nodded back. He was wearing the canvas jacket. He always wore the canvas jacket. His mother said the day a man stopped looking like the work that made him was the day he started forgetting who he was. He had not forgotten. He never planned to. And if there's someone in your life who's been made to feel small in a place they had every right to stand, share this story with them tonight. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remind people of what they already are. We'll see you next week on Lineage Tales. Don't go anywhere.